Dimensions of the Daf with Rabbi Mordechai Becher on JBS is made possible in part by the B.L. Manger Foundation in memory of Ben Manger.
Hi, I am Mordechai Becher. Welcome to Jewish Broadcasting Service Dimensions of the Daf, in which we delve into a topic based primarily on sources in the Talmud. And you don't have to have seen previous classes. You don't have to see the subsequent classes. Each class is a quantum unit of Talmud that stands by itself. And as you can probably see, I am not being filmed by my favorite cameraman, Serge, but rather I am doing this at home, as I usually do at home, but I usually have the help of a professional. So today I am filming this myself. So anyway, any faults are mine. Now, we are talking today about capitalism. Is Judaism capitalist? Does Judaism, traditional Judaism, support a capitalist system in which people work, earn their money, etc., or does it support a socialist system in which the state takes care of everyone, each person gives their labor, each person receives what they need, etc. Private ownership is frowned upon, and so on. I think there's no yes and no answer here. I think we will see that there are aspects of both systems which the Torah supports, although my belief is that it leans more towards capitalism than towards socialism. Let's have a look at some of the sources. The first slide you see has the book of Tehillim, Psalms, which says, very famous psalm, Mizmor Shir Amalos Ashrei Kol Yirei Hashem Oholech B'Drachav, a song of degrees, a song of ascents. Happy is the God-fearing person who walks in the ways of God. Fine, not totally relevant. I just want to read, that's the first sentence. Yegia kapecha kisochal, ashrecha v'tovlach. When you eat the labor of your hands, you will be happy and it will be good for you. Interesting statements. King David tells us in Psalms that ideally, the ideal is that a person should eat from the fruit of their own labor. And when you do that, you'll be happy and it will be good for you. What's the repetition of that phrase, happy and good for you? So if you have a look, the Talmud, which I have here, the Gemara in Brachos, Talmud in Brachot 8a, says the following. Reb Chia said in the name of Ula, greater is the person who benefits from the labor of their own hands than a God-fearing person who doesn't involve themselves in labor. Interesting, because regarding a God-fearing person, it says, Ashrei ish, happy is the man who is God-fearing. Fine, happy. If you're God-fearing, you're happy. But the Talmud notes, Ilu gabe nene miyagia kapov, regarding the person who benefits from the labor of their own hands, it says there, Ashrecha, both you are happy, v'tovlach, and it's good for you. There's a double expression, and the Talmud understands, Ashrecha, you are happy in this world, tovlach, will be good for you in the world to come. So the Talmud is telling us that there is an advantage for someone who works and benefits from the labor of their own hands. They are happy in this world, and they will benefit from it also in the world to come. And why is that so? Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, great Kabbalist and philosopher of Padua in the 18th century, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says that the entire idea of creation was to create an environment in which the human being could earn closeness to God. God, so to speak, doesn't give, I have to create myself. God doesn't give me self, because any self which is given is not really self. It's someone else. And consequently, God creates an environment in which we can work to earn our closeness to God. And that's why we have free will. That's why we have challenges. That's why we have the evil inclination. That's why there's concealment. And so in the bedrock of creation, in the very foundation of our world, is the concept of working in order to earn. So the human being has a sense of pride that's built into us because we are similar to God. Just as God is completely self-contained, completely independent, does not need anything or anyone else. There is nothing outside of God. So he created the human being with a very similar capacity, the capacity to be, and the desire to be independent, and the desire to be self-contained, self-actualizing. So that leans heavily towards the idea of capitalism, in which what I get is what I earn. What I earn is what I get. In addition, there's another interesting Mishnah. The Mishnah on the next screen, Masechet Avot in Ethics of the Fathers, said the following. There are 4 types of character in human beings. Arba midot ba'adam. One who says mine is mine and yours is yours. That's regular. I recognize that you have property. I recognize that I have property. I recognize that boundary. Some say this is Sodom. That's pretty harsh. The city of Sodom and Amorah, which were destroyed by God. So we'll have to see what that means. So some say recognition that what yours is yours, what's mine is just average. Another opinion is that if you say what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine, you are considered to be a character of Sodom. Shocking. Let's have a look further. One that says mine is yours and yours is mine, such a person is ignoramus, unlearned. Because obviously we know there are boundaries. What's yours is not mine and what's mine is not yours. Right? There are boundaries. We recognize that not everything is common property. There are things which are common property, the street outside my house, but my garden and my house, that's not common property. One says mine is yours and yours is a pious person whose entire life is dedicated to others. What's mine, yours. What's yours, you keep. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to give. Such a person is pious, chassid. One who says mine is mine and yours is mine is a wicked person. Obviously, the other extreme is the person who says not only is what I have mine, but what you have is also mine. Such a person is a rasha, a wicked person. So I understand the pious person. Wants to give, does not want to take. I understand the definition of a wicked person, only wants to take and have, does not want to give, does not want to share. What I find it hard to understand here is the person who says what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. And according to one opinion, he is equated with the terrible city of Sodom. Let's have a look at the next source. This is in Yechezkel, the prophet Ezekiel. Because if you look in the Torah itself, in Genesis, it doesn't really tell me what they did wrong in the city of Sodom. There's a story there in which they abuse a guest, a traveler, etc. But it doesn't really give me a definition of what they did wrong. If you look in book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel, he says it. What it says here is this, Ezekiel 16. Behold, Zehaya avon Sodom achosech. This was the sin of Sodom, your sister. Gaon, pride, savat lechem, a surfeit of bread, a satiation of bread, abundance, shalvat hasheket, an abundance of quiet and idleness. Hayala, believe noseh, Sodom and the neighboring cities they had a surplus of food, they had pride, they had tranquility. And listen carefully. V'yad ani ve'evyon lo hechzika, but they did not support the hand of the poor and the destitute. So I think that is what the Mishnah refers to. What it's saying here is the following. If you say what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine, and never the twain shall meet, that is, if you just understand that as there are boundaries, mine is mine, yours is yours, that's average. But if you see that as an absolute, that I will never give to you, and I don't expect anything from you, that is tantamount to being from the city of Sodom. Because we understand that when God grants us wealth and grants us material possessions, we are stewards. Yes, I'm allowed to use it for myself, but there's an expectation also that I will share with others, that I will help others. To have and indeed there are midrashim that say that what they'd had in Sodom, they considered it a capital crime to give charity. And they considered it a capital crime to receive charity. Why is that? They were such an extreme of capitalism, so to speak, that they understood that if you need charity, you can't make it yourself, you're not a complete human being. You deserve to die. And that if I help you in that dependency, they would say that's a capital punishment because you have just taken away that person's humanity by giving to them. So there's a kernel of truth in that, because the kernel of truth is that, yes, a person is supposed to be independent, but to not have any flexibility, to not have any sympathy, to not have any understanding of a person who did not make it, a person who is less fortunate, and not to share with such a person, that is being from Sodom, and that is basically evil. And indeed, if you look at the next screen, I have an excellent article by Professor Yehuda Levi, scientist in Israel, in a month, actually it's a quarterly called Ba'or HaTorah. It's called The Right to Private Property. And he says this, there's probably the first sage, he says, refers to one who opts only for the capitalist apparatus, shunning its spirit. In other words, he says, what's mine is mine, I earned it. What's yours is yours, you earned it. But he does not have any of the flexibility or the spirit. The second comment refers to one who chooses capitalism, including its spirit. Like this, the first sage refers to one who insists on his monetary rights, but recognizes the duties linked to those rights. You see, if I understand that what mine is mine and yours is yours, but I also understand that if I do have something that actually imposes upon me an obligation to help others, that imposes upon me an obligation to share, that's acceptable capitalism. The second, the person who is considered to be from Sodom, one who insists on his rights, but does not recognize his duties vis-a-vis others. And that's exactly what Yechezkel says. The people in Sodom were successful. They had food, they had tranquility, they had security, etc. And they said, yeah, well, we earned it. Because we earned it, we're not going to share it with anyone. And that is where Yechezkel, Prophet Yechezkel, that's where God came along and said to them, you are sinners. That is evil. So yes, we endorse the idea of private property. We endorse the idea that what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. But we add to that not only the right of ownership, but we add to that the obligations of property. Meaning, when I do have property, I have an obligation to help others. And that obligation is something that that is given by God. And so, and how do we, and the truth is, in most societies, we recognize that there is an obligation. For example, we have taxation. What do a lot of my taxes go to? A lot of my taxes go to support people who are less fortunate, people who are unemployed, people who are disabled, people who are sick. I'm okay with that. I understand. I earned money, but that money is not only a right, it's also a duty. Now that I have earned the money, I have an obligation to support. For example, I sent my children, they're out of school, but I've sent my children to private schools, private Jewish schools. Some of my taxes go to support public schools, even though I do not use those public schools. I understand that. As a member of society, it's my duty to help society make progress, to help society be safe and productive. One of the ways to do that is ensuring education for all. So that's fine with me. I'm okay that those taxes go to support because it's a duty. And that is how we understand it. So in the Mishnah, which says, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, that's average, that's a normal person. That's only if that person understands what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, but each of us now has duties and obligations, not just rights. The second view of the Mishnah, which says that is the attribute of Sodom, the city of Sodom, is saying that's when you say it's only about my rights and it's not about my obligations. And that is very problematic. If we look at the next screen, we'll also see that some of those duties involve finance. In fact, a lot of our duties in the Torah, many, many commandments involve finance. Have a look. Leviticus 19. Lo sa'ashokes re'echa. Don't oppress your neighbor. What that means is don't rip them off in business. Don't rob them. So we are not allowed to, we have to be honest in business, etc. Now, yes, capitalism, earn what you can, but don't do anything to get it. There are limitations. For example, also the wages of a hired worker shall not abide with you until the morning. In the absence of a prior agreement, there is a biblical obligation to pay a worker that day before nightfall. Obviously, if you have a contract and we have an agreement and I pay him at the end of the month, or I pay him at the end of the week, that's fine. But the prohibition is don't delay payment of a hired worker. And if you have a look, do not cheat one another. You shall fear God. I am God. Deuteronomy, don't oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether he is of your brother or a stranger. At this day, you shall give him his wages. You must pay him on the day, right that day, or if there's another agreement, on the day you agreed upon. Nor shall the sun go down on it. And listen why. It says, for he is poor and he gives his soul for that money. Lest he cry against you to the Lord, it should be a sin to you. We recognize that when a person works, they give their very soul for it. Which is true. The Talmud, for example, points out that when a person, there are many jobs which are very dangerous. For example, a person works as a roofer. He goes up onto the roof. He risks falling. He risks injury. An electrician, a plumber, many, many jobs involve the risk of injury. And there are jobs that involve risk to life itself. And yet people do them because we need to make a living. We need to support ourselves. We need to support our families. And I have to recognize that this person has given me of his very self. If he's given me time, that means he's given me of his very self. There was a Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik who had a very interesting insight in how it works. What's the obligation to pay my workers? He says, because since that worker improved my property, since that worker improved my capital by giving his very life, i.e. his time and his soul, he now has acquired a portion of that because he put himself into it. So by paying him his wages, I'm, so to speak, buying off his portion in my field, in my factory, in my house, etc. Very interesting. That's almost socialist in that sense. He's recognizing that the worker, because that worker has invested himself, has invested herself, body and soul in the job, that's a form of acquisition. There could be no greater acquisition. Investing money is one thing, but investing my life, investing myself, tremendous. So when I pay them, I must take that payment with great seriousness. Or rather, I should give that payment with great seriousness. I should take it very seriously because I understand that I'm really paying that person for their life and limb, for their devotion, for their time, which are all very, very central. So we see that on the one hand, we endorse private property. On the one hand, we encourage work and labor and feel that it's a positive thing to work for your keep. And it's a positive thing, even greater, as we said, than a God-fearing is for a person to work and earn their living. But we also recognize that that imposes an obligation and a duty to share and to help others, an obligation and a duty not to oppress and to hurt others, an obligation to pay workers because they've given their very life and their self for that job. And these are all obligations of the property owner. And if we have a look also in the next screen, Maimonides tells me a very interesting thing. When Maimonides talks about the laws of charity, as we know in Jewish law, I'm obligated to give charity. It's not just a fun thing to do, right? A good thing. That was my attempt at a Southern American accent. I'm sorry. But it's not just a good thing to do. It's actually an obligation. In fact, the very word tzedakah, which means charity, doesn't mean charity. The word tzedakah is much more closely associated with the word tzedek, which means justice. My giving some of what I have earned to the poor, the Torah considers to be an act of justice. If I do someone a favor, that's called chesed, that's kindness. That's over and above. But giving money to those who are poor, that's actually an obligation. Interesting, by the way, it is a custom, fairly universal custom amongst observant Jews. This goes back over 1,000 years, to give 10% of our income to charity. So over and above whatever the taxes are, over and above that, I'm supposed to give 10%. But here it's interesting. You're not supposed to give more than 20, because there's no value in my becoming destitute in order to help other people, because then I'll now become a burden. So there are limitations, right? Unless you're fabulously wealthy. But in general, right, you give around 10%. So here Maimonides talks about the laws of charity. I know I prefaced it by saying, when you talk about laws of charity, that sounds like it's a law, and the answer is it is. Right? It is an obligation in Jewish law. But look at what Maimonides says. There are 8 levels of charity. Each level surpasses the other. The highest level, beyond which there is nothing higher. What would you guess? What's the highest level of charity? Most people would say, oh, giving anonymously. Not knowing who you're giving to, and the person doesn't know who he's getting from. Giving generously, giving with a pleasant way. Says, no, those are all fantastic, but those are not the highest level of charity. The highest level of charity is where there is a person who supports a Jew who has fallen into poverty by giving him a present or a loan, entering into a partnership with him, or finding him work, so that his hand will be fortified, so that he will not have to ask for others. Maimonides tells us that the highest level of charity is giving someone the means to support themselves. Give them a loan, give them an investment, give them a job. Giving someone a handout is not the ideal. Again, because the whole essence of the human being is to be like God. God doesn't get handouts. God gives. So therefore, the best thing I can do for someone is not to give to them a handout, but to give them the possibility of supporting themselves. That would be the ideal. And that's what we say. And when it comes to competition, because part of capitalism is competing in business, there's an interesting Gemara. It's lengthy, so I'm not going to do the whole thing because we are running out of time. But the Talmud says that someone complained that a storekeeper one of the rabbis said a storekeeper should not give out walnuts. What was it he was giving out? They're like treats for the kids. Toasted grain and nuts. I guess kids then enjoyed toasted grain and nuts. The equivalent today will be chocolate. So the Gemara says the following, right? Rabbi Yehuda said a storekeeper should not be giving out fruits and nuts to the kids to attract people, because the other storekeeper is not fair. So the Talmud and the halacha, however, Jewish law says no, it's not a prohibition. Why? Because he could say, look, I gave out roasted grain and nuts. You can give out walnuts and raisins. No, it's not. I'm not stopping you. As long as you're not doing anything illegal to attract business, then it's okay to attract business, and that is fair competition. That is acceptable, which again is part of the capitalist system. Right. And so anyway, what's our conclusion? Right. If you have a look at the last screen, very beautiful essay by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. We are what we do, not what we own. This is in regards to the idea that every 7 years, the whole land of Israel, at least in the times of the temple, when most Jews lived in Israel, would have Shemitah, the sabbatical year. We still observe it today in a rabbinical fashion, so it's less what it was. But then landowners would have to actually declare their land ownerless pretty much for the year. Anyone could come onto the land and take fruit and vegetables, animals, humans, etc. It was a way of saying that ultimately, even what I own, I don't ultimately own. It really belongs to God, who is the ultimate owner and is the ultimate Lord of the manor, so to speak. And so there's a recognition that everything I have really, it's given to me to take care of and to use it well and to distribute it well. So yes, it's capitalism, but it's capitalism with a lowercase c, with kind capitalism, a capitalism whereby I have the right to money, I have the right to my property, but that right also involves obligations towards those less fortunate, obligations towards the society, obligations towards community, and to fulfill that idea. And so anyway, that's a little bit of a taste of the idea of capitalism in the Talmud. This is Mordechai Becher with Jewish Broadcasting Service, Dimensions of the Daf. If you're interested in my written word, not just the spoken, but my book, Gateway to Judaism, available on Amazon and other book distributors. Are there other book distributors? I guess there are. So bookstores, right, I remember those. And also please tune in to Jewish Broadcasting Service for all our wonderful programming. And a shout out to anyone who I see. I just was at an engagement party, and the mother of the color, the bride, said, "Oh, I know you. You're on JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service. I listen to you all the time," which was always nice to get that type of recognition. So anyway, stay safe and stay sane. This is Mordechai Becher, Dimensions of the Daf.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.